What if everything you've been taught about being tough is not just wrong, but actually making you weaker? Picture the coach screaming in a player's face until he breaks, the drill sergeant who believes pain is the only teacher, the parent who tells their crying kid to suck it up and stop being so soft. For generations, we've told ourselves that toughness looks like gritted teeth, a stone face, and the ability to suffer in silence. No fear, no doubt, no weakness allowed. Here's a name you might not expect in a book about mental strength. Jordan McNair, a 19-year-old college football player who collapsed during a brutal conditioning workout in 2018. Coaches yelled at him to keep moving as his body was already shutting down. It took over an hour before anyone called for help. He died 2 weeks later. That is where the old model of toughness leads when you follow it all the way to the end. Here's the myth. Almost all of us grew up believing that toughness means never showing weakness, bulldozing through pain no matter the cost, and hiding anything that looks like fear or doubt. Show emotion and you're soft. Ask for help and you've failed. The tougher you are, the less you feel. Steve Magness knows this myth from the inside. He's an elite running coach who has trained Olympians and world record holders, and a performance scientist who has spent years studying the science of endurance and mental strength. He also, mid-race, once had his own body betray him completely. His throat closed up, his breathing shut down, and he collapsed on the track in the middle of a mile he'd trained his whole life to run. That moment sent him on a search for what toughness actually is, a search that runs through his book, Do Hard Things. Here's the central idea. Real toughness has nothing to do with callousness and everything to do with your ability to stay clear-headed under discomfort long enough to make a good decision. It isn't about ignoring pain, fear, or doubt. It's about listening to them, understanding what they're telling you, and choosing your next move instead of being controlled by panic. In this video, we'll walk through 9 lessons drawn from the science of elite performers, Navy SEALs, and Olympic champions. We'll look at why the military doesn't actually build toughness the way you think it does, why confidence should be quiet, not loud, why your emotions are messages, not commands, and exactly how to keep a clear head when everything inside you is screaming to quit. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Myth of the Tough Guy. Here's the principle. What we've been calling toughness for the last century isn't toughness at all. It's a costume. Most people, when they picture a tough individual, picture someone loud, someone who never flinches, never cries, never admits to being scared. Legendary basketball coach Bobby Knight built a program on exactly this idea, famous for winning games and equally famous for choking a player on camera and humiliating anyone he deemed soft. For decades, that image, the screaming coach, the demanding drill sergeant, the parent who rules through fear, has passed for the gold standard of building strength in other people. The people who actually produce results long-term do something almost opposite. Take Pete Carroll, one of only 3 coaches in history to win both a college national championship and the Super Bowl. His practices include yoga, meditation, and a rule that mistakes get turned into teaching moments instead of punishment. Researchers who studied nearly 200 basketball players and their coaches found the same pattern: teams performed best under coaches who built trust, humility, and inclusion, not fear. Here's why the fear-based model fails. It produces what Magness calls fake toughness, a performance for other people, built on appearance instead of substance. It's control-driven, fueled by insecurity, and it collapses the moment the pressure that was propping it up disappears. Authoritarian parenting research backs this up directly. Kids raised under harsh, fear-based discipline show lower independence, more aggression, and higher rates of risky behavior, not more resilience. The exercise here is a reframe you can apply immediately the next time you catch yourself, or someone you're leading, trying to look tough. Ask what's actually happening underneath. Real toughness isn't about performing strength for an audience. It's the quiet ability to feel discomfort, stay clear-headed inside it, and choose your next move deliberately. Toughness was never about hiding what you feel. It's about staying present with it long enough to act wisely. Chapter 2. We copy the wrong lesson from the military. The sink or swim model of building toughness isn't just unproven, it's a misunderstanding of how the toughest institution on earth actually trains people. Most people assume the military builds toughness by throwing recruits into brutal, punishing conditions and seeing who survives. In 1954, football coach Bear Bryant tried exactly that with his Texas A&M team, dragging nearly 100 players to a merciless 10-day camp in the Texas heat. 70 quit. The team that remained went 1-9 that season. 2 years later, when A&M finally had a great season, most of the stars on that roster hadn't even been at the infamous camp. The story became legend anyway, because it's a better story than the truth. Here's what the military actually does, and it's almost never sorting for toughness. It's teaching for it. Before Navy SEAL candidates or Air Force pilots are ever dropped into a brutal survival scenario, they go through hundreds of pages of classroom instruction, how to manage boredom, loneliness, fear, and hopelessness, long before they're tested on any of it. It's called stress inoculation, and the entire concept depends on teaching the skill first. Throwing someone into the deep end only works if you've already taught them to swim. There's real science behind why this matters. Under extreme combat stress, researchers found that 96% of soldiers experience some form of dissociation, a kind of mental fog where memory and perception break down. The soldiers who kept a clear head under that same stress weren't immune to fear. They had simply been taught, in advance, how to appraise the threat accurately and respond with a range of tools instead of one blunt hammer. The takeaway exercise before you face your next high-pressure moment, whether it's a presentation, a hard conversation, or a physical challenge, invest time beforehand, learning and rehearsing the specific skills that situation demands. Don't wait to toughen up in the moment. Build the toolkit first. We didn't need to copy the military's suffering. We needed to copy its teaching. Chapter 3. Embrace reality. Instead of faking confidence, toughness starts long before the hard moment arrives, in how accurately you size up the challenge in front of you. Most people think the path to performing well under pressure is pumping yourself up, telling yourself the task will be easy, and drowning out any doubt with forced positivity. Watch a group of grade school kids run a mile, and you'll see the cost of this approach in real time. They sprint off the line with total confidence, hit the wall by lap 2, and stagger to the finish. Compare that to an experienced marathoner who paces evenly because their internal sense of effort matches reality from the very first step. Elite performers do something different. They accurately size up both the demands of the task and their own current capacity to meet it. Free solo climber Alex Honnold, who famously climbed the 3,000-foot rock face without ropes, had his brain scanned by neuroscientists while looking at disturbing images. His fear center, the amygdala, showed almost no reaction, but Honnold isn't fearless. Partway through his first attempt at that climb, he felt the fear was real, said, "This is too scary," and walked away that day, coming back only when he trained enough to trust his margin was real, not imagined. The science backs this up directly. Researchers have found that when there's a big mismatch between what we expect and what we encounter, our brain overcorrects and shuts down, either by freezing when things get harder than expected, or by giving up entirely when a goal feels impossibly out of reach. Accurate appraisal, not blind confidence, keeps you in the fight. Here's the exercise. Straight from performance research: set goals just beyond your current capability, not wildly beyond it. Judge yourself by your effort and execution, not just the outcome, since outcomes are rarely fully in your control. And when you're exhausted or stressed, remember that your brain will systematically underestimate what you're capable of, so build in a buffer before you decide something is impossible. Toughness doesn't start on the starting line. It starts with seeing the race and yourself clearly. Chapter 4. True confidence is quiet. The loudest confidence in the room is usually the most fragile, and real confidence rarely needs to announce itself. Most people try to build confidence by hyping themselves up, chasing self-esteem slogans, or projecting bravado they don't fully feel. The self-esteem movement that swept schools in the 80s and 90s, built on the idea that simply feeling good about yourself would drive success, has been picked apart by researchers who found little scientific backing behind it. It also produced a generation with measurably higher rates of narcissism. Loud confidence, it turns out, is often armor for insecurity, not evidence against it. The people with real, durable confidence build it a different way. Professional runner Brian Barraza put it simply: instead of chasing his best ever performance, his goal is to raise the floor, to know that on an average day, without anything clicking perfectly, he can still hit a solid standard. That quiet certainty, built from repetition, frees him up to take bigger swings when the moment calls for it. There are 4 concrete moves behind this kind of confidence. First, lower the bar and raise the floor. Judge yourself by your average, not your rare best. Second, shed perfection and embrace who you actually are, since real toughness includes being honest about your weaknesses, not hiding them. Third, trust your training, not your fear. Confidence built through fear of failure creates more insecurity, while confidence built through genuine preparation holds up under pressure. And fourth, develop what psychologists call a quiet ego, one secure enough to hear criticism without immediately getting defensive. Try this exercise. Instead of tracking your personal best, track the average of your 5 most recent attempts at something you're working on. Notice how that number, not your one great day, becomes the truer measure of what you can rely on. Confidence isn't the absence of doubt. It's having done the work honestly enough that the doubt doesn't run the show. Chapter 5. The power of choice. Our sense of control isn't a minor detail in how we handle hard things. It's often the entire difference between giving up and pushing through. Most people don't realize how much their persistence depends on believing they have some say in the outcome. In a famous line of research on learned helplessness, dogs that could stop a mild shock by moving to a different chamber learned quickly and kept trying. Dogs that had no way to stop the same shock eventually gave up entirely, even once escape became possible. They'd learned that nothing they did mattered. The shock wasn't what broke them. The lack of control was. People and teams who stay resilient under pressure protect a sense of choice wherever they can find it. Researchers studying the brain found that when we have a sense of control and actively choose our actions, we activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for calm, deliberate decision-making. Take away that sense of choice, and we default to older, more reactive parts of the brain built for pure survival. This applies well beyond survival experiments. In leadership and coaching, giving people real choices within clear boundaries, instead of dictating every move, consistently produces better performance and more resilience than pure command and control. It's not about removing structure. It's about giving people a genuine hand on the wheel inside that structure. Here's an exercise to build this for yourself the next time you feel overwhelmed by a task. Look for the smallest decision you can still make freely. What order to tackle the steps in, when to take a break, how to approach just the next 5 minutes. Claiming even a small piece of control reactivates your capacity to think clearly instead of shutting down. When we lose our sense of choice, we lose our capacity to cope. Protect your sense of control even in small ways, and you protect your ability to keep going. Chapter 6. Your emotions are messengers, not dictators. Fear, anxiety, and pain aren't malfunctions in your system. They're your body sending you information, and the goal isn't to silence them, it's to read them correctly. Most people treat difficult emotions as problems to be crushed or ignored. Grit your teeth, push the fear down, don't let anyone see you sweat. But research on decision-making tells a different story. Patients with brain damage that disconnected their emotions from their reasoning weren't left as flawless logical machines. They became paralyzed, unable to make even simple decisions, because emotion is a critical ingredient in good judgment, not an obstacle to it. People who handle pressure well relate to their emotions differently. They treat a racing heart before a big presentation not as proof that something's wrong, but as their body preparing them for action. Athletes who reframe peer competition nerves as excitement rather than dread consistently perform better, because the physical sensation is nearly identical. What differs is the story they tell themselves about what it means. Here's a two-part exercise Magness recommends for building this skill. First, expand your emotional vocabulary. Most of us describe feelings the way a small child describes people: good, bad, nice, scary. Push for more precision. Is this nervousness, dread, anticipation, or performance adrenaline? Second, separate the physical sensation from the meaning you attach to it. Sweaty palms and a racing heart are just physiology. Whether you call that anxiety or excitement is a choice you get to make, and that choice changes how your body responds next. Emotions aren't the enemy of a clear head. They're the raw data. Learn to read the message instead of just reacting to the noise, and you'll make better decisions under exactly the pressure that used to derail you. Chapter 7. Own the voice in your head. You don't have just one inner voice. You have several, and learning to manage the conversation between them is a skill you can train. Most people assume their inner monologue is a fixed, single narrator they have no control over, especially the harsh, critical version that shows up under stress. But researchers who study self-talk have found something more useful. How you frame that inner voice changes its power over you almost entirely. Elite performers use 3 specific tactics to win the inner debate. First, they sometimes take their inner voice and say it out loud. Magness himself did this mid-race, blurting, "You're good, look. You can talk to a struggling body," and felt an immediate physical shift, because verbalizing a thought is cognitively simpler and more direct than silently thinking it. Second, they pay attention to whether their self-talk is actually believed, since research shows positive self-talk only helps people who already have a baseline of self-belief. False bravado doesn't fool your own brain. Third, and most powerfully, they create distance by switching from I to their own name, or you. In one study, 6-year-olds asked to reflect using their own name, or by imagining what Batman would do, stayed on a boring task nearly twice as long as kids using I. Distance quiets panic. Closeness amplifies it. Try this exercise the next time your inner critic gets loud. Instead of thinking, "I can't do this," try, "Sarah, you've done harder things than this," or simply, "You've got this." That small grammatical shift moves you from being flooded by the emotion to observing it. The same shift a good friend gives you automatically when you ask for their advice, instead of trying to solve it alone in your own head. You can't always choose whether a voice shows up in your head, but you can choose how close you let it stand, and that changes everything about how loud it gets. Chapter 8. Keep a steady mind and learn to zoom under pressure. Your attention either narrows into tunnel vision or spirals into panic, and learning to consciously widen or narrow your focus is one of the most trainable toughness skills there is. Most people, when overwhelmed, either freeze on one terrifying detail or spiral into catastrophic thinking that pulls in everything at once. Pilots call the narrow version inattentional deafness, a kind of tunnel vision so intense they stop hearing alarms right next to them. It's useful for a few seconds of extreme focus. It's disastrous as a default state. People who handle sustained pressure well can deliberately shift between zoomed-in focus and zoomed-out perspective depending on what the moment requires. Elite meditators, studied at the University of Wisconsin, showed a measurably faster recovery after stressful images than non-meditators, not because they suppress the reaction, but because they'd trained the ability to notice a feeling arise and let it pass without escalating it. Runners describe something similar mid-race, learning to have what Magness calls a calm conversation with the body, distinguishing between a genuinely dangerous pain signal, like the sharp warning of a possible injury, and the ordinary tolerable burn of hard effort. Here's a simple exercise for training this practice: sitting in silence for 5 minutes with no phone, no distraction, just noticing whatever sensations or thoughts arise without chasing them or pushing them away. Over weeks, extend that to 15 or 20 minutes. You're not trying to feel good. You're training your mind's ability to observe discomfort without immediately reacting to it, a muscle that transfers directly to every hard moment outside of that quiet room. You don't need to eliminate discomfort to think clearly inside it. You need the trained capacity to zoom in when it counts, zoom out when you're spiraling, and notice the difference between the two. Chapter 9. Build the foundation and find the meaning. Toughness isn't sustainable on willpower alone. It's built on top of 3 basic psychological needs, and it becomes unbreakable once you find genuine meaning in the struggle itself. Most people assume motivation comes from external pressure, a bonus, a scholarship, a coach yelling from the sideline, a fear of consequences. But decades of research on self-determination theory point to something else entirely. We're wired to need autonomy, a sense of choice in our own actions, competence, a sense that we're capable and making progress, and relatedness, a genuine sense of connection to other people. Starve any of these 3, and motivation collapses, no matter how big the external reward is. Steve Kerr, coach of the Golden State Warriors, built one of the most dominant teams in NBA history, partly by deliberately handing over control during games, letting players make real decisions instead of dictating every possession from the sideline. It wasn't softness. It was trust, and trust satisfies a need that fear never can. The final piece is meaning. Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist Viktor Frankl found, and later research on trauma survivors confirmed, that people who actively made sense of their suffering, who integrated it into their life story instead of avoiding it, showed far greater resilience than those who simply endured and moved on. The exercise here isn't complicated, but it is uncomfortable. Instead of pushing a hard experience out of your mind once it's over, sit with it. Ask what it taught you, what it revealed about your capacity, and how it connects to what you actually care about. Meaning doesn't erase the pain. It gives the pain a place to live inside your story, instead of haunting the edges of it. Real toughness isn't a switch you flip in the moment of crisis. It's a foundation you build every ordinary day before the crisis ever arrives. Here's the shift this book asks you to make. Stop chasing the appearance of toughness, the stone face, the gritted teeth, the refusal to admit anything hurts, and start building the real thing, the quiet, trained ability to stay clear-headed inside discomfort long enough to choose your next move well. None of this means the hard things get easier. Fear still shows up. Doubt still shows up. Your body will still want to quit somewhere, around the hardest third of whatever you're facing. What changes is your relationship to all of that. Discomfort stops being a signal that something's gone wrong and starts being exactly what it's always been: information and an invitation to grow. Let's run through the toolkit one more time. Stop performing strength and start building it quietly, through honest appraisal of what you're facing. Teach yourself the skill before the crisis, instead of hoping fear alone will forge it. Set goals just beyond your current ability, and judge yourself on effort, not just outcome. Build confidence on your average performance, not your best day. Protect a sense of choice, even a small one, whenever you feel overwhelmed. Treat your emotions as messengers, and learn their specific vocabulary. Use distance in your self-talk, moving from I to your own name when panic creeps in. Train your attention to zoom in and out on purpose. And when the hard thing is finally behind you, don't just move on, make meaning of it. That's the whole book, distilled into tools you can use, starting with the next hard thing you face today. If this summary gave you something worth carrying into your next difficult moment, hit subscribe here on the Mind Master, because we break down one book like this every single week. But don't just watch it and move on. Pick the hardest thing on your plate this week, and instead of bracing to bulldoze through it, pause first and ask what it's actually asking of you. Turn the theory into power.